So we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you everyone for attending today. This is our ICRC's second Fair Housing live virtual presentation. My name is Mackenzie Holden. I serve as the Communications Manager for the Indiana Civil Rights Commission, and we started hosting these live webinars back in late March, early April, when we kind of had to make a quick adjustment on our educational presentations and trainings in order to accommodate due to the social distancing, but we wanted to continue our outreach and our education efforts throughout the community. So we understand that everybody's had to make a lot of drastic lifestyle changes during the pandemic, and we would just want to stay here and help out spreading the word with this incredibly useful information and resources out to all the Hoosiers. There's a lot of state and government agencies and organizations that have created and offered a lot of vital resources, guidelines, assistance programs throughout the pandemic, but we have found that a lot of Hoosiers are unaware of these offerings, and as it's our mission to serve our community and Indiana residents, we knew that we had to step up and we needed to partner with these agencies and organizations to help spread the word and share all of these available opportunities for Hoosiers. So it's been a long road, but there are still plenty of resources and assistance programs that are still out there. And today we have an ICRC speaker as well as two guest speakers who will give agency overviews and help explain to everybody what it is that their agency or organization can do or offer to help those struggling with housing and utility resources and needs during the pandemic. So our first presenter will be our very own Tim Schultz, the Deputy Director of the Indiana Civil Rights Commission, followed by Debbie Driskell, Executive Director of the Indiana Township Association, and then we'll conclude with Brad Meadows, the Director of Marketing Communications at the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority, IHCDA. So each presenter is going to list a lot of beneficial and important information and resources throughout their presentation. They're going to be sharing links and contact information that I will also provide for you in the chat session that you can save those and copy for future uses as well. For a little housekeeping items, all the public attendees do not have access to use their microphone. Therefore, if you are operating on the new Teams application, the updated Teams application, or if you joined this presentation through the web browser, at the very top right of your video screen, you'll see a bar of icons, and you'll have like a little gear, and you'll probably have two little word bubbles, and one of them has a question mark on it. So if you select that question mark, it will open up the Q&A session, and we encourage that throughout the presentations, everybody use that as a place to list your comments or your questions. We will be reviewing them before they're published. So if you type a question and you don't see it automatically populate in the published category, just don't worry. I'll get to it in a minute or two. It might take me a couple minutes to go through all of them at once. We're going to try to keep the personal and specific scenario questions kind of in the private chat area so we can respond to you privately on those. We might be able to answer a few questions during the presentations, but we will also have about 10 to 15 minutes at the conclusion of the presenters to go over all of the questions and answers. If anybody loses any internet connection or they get kicked out, which is very rare on this platform, but if you have to step away and you don't get to the very end of the presentation, the entire presentation is recorded, and we will have that uploaded onto our website at in.gov/ICRC, and that will be uploaded tomorrow morning, and you'll be able to view it, share it, look at all of the questions and answers, and you'll be able to see each presentation fully as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on over to Tim Schultz, Deputy Director of ICRC, and he will have a presentation for you all. So Tim?
All right, thank you, Mackenzie, and I will go ahead and pull up that presentation. So, good afternoon to everyone. As Mackenzie noted, my name is Tim Schultz. I'm the Deputy Director and General Counsel for the Indiana Civil Rights Commission. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. What I'm going to be doing today is just providing a brief summary of the agency, what we're tasked with, and with a focus on our fair housing responsibilities and how those have been impacted in the time of COVID-19. So just a very brief disclaimer. The ICRC we don't make the laws, we just enforce them. Anything I say today shouldn't be considered as legal advice. For legal advice, please contact an attorney. And this presentation is intended to provide general information and guidelines. It shouldn't be considered official agency policy. So what does ICRC do? We enforce the Indiana Civil Rights laws and the Indiana Fair Housing Act. Our jurisdiction extends to individuals, private or public entities, housing providers, and business establishments within the state. Our goal is to, or I should say our mission is the neutral investigation of complaints submitted to the agency with the goal of eliminating discrimination against protected classes in the areas that we have enforcement over. And I really emphasize neutral there because we're tasked with both enforcing the civil rights laws of the state while at the same time protecting the rights of employers and housing providers. So we take that very seriously here at the agency. So the goal is to accumulate all the facts relevant to a particular complaint and then move forward with those facts with either a cause finding or no cause finding. So what are the protected classes and what are our areas of enforcement here at ICRC? As you can see, there are a number of protected classes here, including race, religion, color, sex, disability, ancestry, the areas of enforcement include housing, as I've mentioned, employment, public accommodations, education, and credit. So it's a combination of do you belong to a protected class and have you experienced a discriminatory act in one of the 5 areas that we have enforcement authority. What happens if an individual believes they've experienced a discriminatory act and they want to file a complaint? Well, you can file your complaints either over the phone or online with the agency or through mail or fax. And what happens is those are submitted to our intake division and our intake specialists who will work with individuals who submit complaints to gather some additional information to determine if in fact a discriminatory act has likely occurred, if the agency has authority over the matter, and if after that process, a formalized complaint is submitted to our investigation unit. And our investigation is all done in-house. And our investigators are tasked with, as I mentioned before, fact-finding. They have the ability to request information, request subpoenas to ensure that all parties are responding. And they request information from both the complainant and the respondent and any other related parties in order to ensure that we have a complete picture of what happened as alleged in the complaint. Now, that investigation might result in a no cause finding, at which time the matter is resolved. However, if there is a cause finding, then that complaint will advance to our litigation division, which again is in-house. All of our attorneys are in-house. And what will happen at that point, the matter will be submitted to either an administrative law judge or state courts, depending on the type of matter and the election of the parties. Our attorneys will litigate that matter on behalf of the public interest at no charge, of course, and will argue the matter before an ALJ and then again maybe into state court and possibly all the way up to the Indiana Supreme Court, depending on if the matter continues on in litigation. And one thing I want to really emphasize is that we have, again, an in-house free of charge mediation unit. And the mediation team will work with both parties to see if there is some sort of resolution, maybe monetary, maybe not, and try to resolve that matter that way. And the reason why I emphasize that is that that can often be the quickest way to resolve a matter And we've had a lot of success with over $500,000 in monetary damages awarded in 2019 alone. So that's something that we're very, very proud of here at ICRC. So turning to the Fair Housing Act, because that's really what we're here to talk about today. Talked about the agency and given everybody a little bit of an idea of what we do. So the Fair Housing Act essentially says that providing fair housing practices in the state of Indiana is the state policy, and that the ICRC is tasked with ensuring that that is done through investigation and other means. Who is subject to fair housing laws? Short answer, pretty much everybody with a few exceptions. Sellers, landlords, realtors, homeowners associations, mortgage providers. It's obviously a pretty extensive list, and with a few exceptions, like I said, pretty much everybody. So what does housing discrimination look like? Here at ICRC, we commonly see two types of fair housing discrimination. First is disparate treatment, when a housing provider treats a protected class differently than others that are not in that class. And this is really just the most straightforward type of discrimination you might think about. So let's say a housing provider says, we don't rent to individuals with disabilities. Well, that's obviously, problematic. And again, very straightforward, very simple. Disparate impact is a little more complicated and nuanced. That's when a housing provider employs a facially neutral rule or policy, but the result has a disparate impact on a protected class. So using the example from before, the housing provider has a policy where they limit their housing applicants for something that has a disparate impact on individuals with disabilities, even though that's not the intent of the policy. Well, if there is a disparate impact, then there's still possibly a housing violation, fair housing violation. So we've talked a little bit about what fair housing laws are, what the intent is, and who is subject. Well, now the question is, when can a violation occur? And again, it's a very broad answer. It can happen before the sale or the tenancy, during or after. And I've listed here just some of the very most common types of violations that might occur at every stage. Refusal to sell or rent due to individual being a protected class. Discrimination insurance, providing different rates of insurance based on, again, protected class. That's an easy example. Or refusing to renew a lease with somebody because of their protected class. These are, discrimination can occur in all kinds of different ways. These are just some of the most common. Another issue that comes up a lot in fair housing claims is reasonable accommodation and modification requests. As you can see on the screen, a reasonable modification is a request to make a physical change to the property that's necessary for the individual to use and enjoy the property, whereas a reasonable accommodation is a request to an exception to a rule or policy or practice to accommodate an individual's disability. And you can see there, generally speaking, reasonable modification and accommodation requests should be granted. Now that doesn't mean that everything is reasonable. If a housing provider can show that there's an undue financial burden and administrative burden with such a request, then that accommodation or modification might not be considered reasonable and doesn't have to be granted. I think the most important thing to remember is documentation for these types of requests. And I mean documentation for both sides, that both the individual making the request and the housing provider that receives the request document that the request has been made, and then engaging in an interactive process when those requests are received. Simply doing nothing, if you're a housing provider, is probably going to be problematic, and that's one of the worst things you can do, is just not do anything or not engage in some sort of discussion with that individual. So that's a very high-level review of fair housing laws and types of discrimination you might see with fair housing, and who's subject and when it might occur. So let's talk a little bit about fair housing in the era of COVID-19. Obviously, COVID-19 has impacted many areas of life, and fair housing is one of them. The thing that I always start off with when we get questions is the fair housing laws still apply. They haven't changed. Everybody who was subject to fair housing before and the requirements is still subject to them now. And you know, a couple of issues that come up a lot, you know, what happens if a housing provider learns they have an individual who's been, you know, tested positive in their housing unit, because that happens all the time now. Obviously the worst thing you can do in this situation is to specifically identify any individual who has had that kind of diagnosis. That doesn't mean that housing providers can't provide generalized warnings, like putting up signs in a common area that, you know, reminding people to wash their hands and use hand sanitizer. That's probably going to be just fine. But you never want to identify a specific individual in a situation like that. You know, we here at ICRC have seen an increase in discrimination complaints regarding individuals who might have a perceived more likelihood of having a COVID-19 positive diagnosis. Again, if you're treating anybody differently based on their protected class, that's a potential discriminatory act. So just be very, very mindful of that. And again, you know, reasonable modification accommodation requests, those still should be granted, but in the time of COVID-19, the analysis might be a little bit different as far as the costs associated with trying to accommodate those requests. And you know, these are the types of things that we just remind everybody to be, you know, thinking about all the time. You know, the laws still apply. The analysis might change a little bit about what you do when you get a request, but just be mindful that those laws are still in effect. So that is my presentation. The contact information for the agency is there. Our phone number is 317-232-2600, or you can submit inquiries at in.gov/ICRC. And I always just encourage people that even if you're not sure that you've experienced a discriminatory act, contact us and we'll walk you through it, because it's not always obvious, and it's better, you know, to contact us and voice that concern than do nothing. With that, I will return control to Mackenzie. Again, thank you for the opportunity. I hope everybody's having a great day.
Thank you, Tim. Let's see. Okay, there we go. And like I said, I will be having these, all of the links and everything will be able to be viewed in the chat session if anybody would like to kind of copy and paste that stuff back over there and be able to use those emails and everything. And the whole entire presentations will be on our website as well. So I will go ahead and send it over to Debbie with the Indiana Township Trustees. Debbie, go ahead.
Thank you, Mackenzie, and thank you for this opportunity to talk a little bit about Indiana Township Trustees. The state of Indiana started establishing township trustees way back in the 1800s, and their sole purpose at that time was to take care of people in their townships that find themselves in need. At that time, it was called poor relief, and trustees were required to go out and look for people that needed help. And that continues today. By state statute, state law requires township trustees to be sure that no one needlessly suffers in their townships. So you might ask, what exactly does a township trustee do? And as I said, we're to care for people and to see that their health and safety are protected, and we're to help people get back on their feet if they find that they're in a situation that is beyond their ability to take care of. And you know, there are different things in life that bring people to the township trustee's office, and it could be something like a job loss, it could be an illness, or a change in family structure. Those are just three examples, but you know, when a person or a household finds themselves unable to pay their rent or mortgage, to pay their utility bill. These are things that township trustees take very seriously, and I need to define for you what we consider an emergency. And actually state law defines that for us. And it simply means when, when there's a circumstance or a set of circumstances that prevent a person or a household from meeting their most basic needs, and through no fault of their own, and they've basically tried to meet those needs and are unable to, that becomes an emergency. So if someone is, threatened to lose their housing or have a utility shut off, those kinds of things will bring them to the trustee, and we can take a look at the situation and determine if there are other needs at the time of an application. And here's a list of just an example of what statute defines as basic needs or basic township assistance provisions. In food and clothing, shelter, we can give limited medical care and fill prescriptions that are necessary for a person's well-being. Transportation is limited, but trustees can help at times with transportation to seek and accept employment or to get medical treatment. We take care of utilities many times, household necessities, things that you can't buy, any other way. What used to be called food stamps does not provide for things like toilet necessities, toilet paper and cleaning supplies, things like that. Trustees can make sure that you have those things. And then there are unexpected expenses. Let's say something happens in your home, you lose a water heater, for example, and that can be a very expensive need. The need for hot water exists, and while a trustee may not pay for a water heater, you might find yourself in a position where you can't pay your rent if you buy a water heater. So those kinds of things are all taken into consideration by the trustee. Some of the things we can't do are things like deposits or late fees. Some townships will not get involved in those reconnect fees for utilities as well. So those are the things that we get involved in. And then there is a process. So the first thing you need to know is that a person in need must contact the trustee where they live. If someone comes to my office as a trustee from another township, I'm not able to help them. I can only get them to the correct trustee. But if a person finds themselves in need, they need to contact their trustee as soon as they're aware of the need. So waiting until the last minute on a disconnect notice puts everybody in a scramble to try to prevent a disconnect. So the sooner that the client approaches the trustee, the better. Each township in Indiana, there are 1,005 townships, but each township has their own set of eligibility requirements. Now, state law outlines in part what we must consider, but each township has their own administrative standards, and those are public documents. So you may request those, to see those from your trustee in order to better understand the process that you're going to be going through. But in every case, every person has the right to apply for assistance. Every person has the right to be given an application and to have that considered by the trustee. Along with the application, the trustee is going to require certain documentation in order for us to verify that the information on the application is true and accurate. And we do conduct an investigation before making a determination. The thing is that makes township assistance a little bit different than other forms of public aid is that a trustee must make a decision on the request within 72 hours of having a final signed document along with the requested verification. So the clock starts once we have that completed application. And aside from weekends and holidays, we have 72 hours. And that decision will be given to the applicant in writing. We have to take a look at the entire household, not just an individual, but if there are others residing at the same address, we take a look at everyone's finances and condition in that household before we can make a determination. Now, the determination will be given in writing to the applicant, and that's the second right that everyone has, is to have the trustee's decision given to them in writing, and that will include the process to appeal the decision. And let me also point out that in a case of an emergency, if an applicant does come and it is something, say it's a prescription for a life-saving medication, blood pressure medicine, insulin, things like that, the trustee has to act immediately. And we really have little room there to take time to do a full investigation. But aside from that, the 72 hours stand, and the trustee can make different determinations. They can approve a request in full. They can give a partial approval and a partial denial. And they can give a full denial or a denial with a referral to another agency. A good example of that might be, especially now that there are other resources available through grants and other programs, such as one you're going to hear about in a little bit from the IHCDA, the trustee can take the application and determine that that need can best be filled by making an application, in that case, with the state of Indiana through IHCDA or another agency. So we do a lot of referrals in the trustee's office, and we meet the needs of the applicants, sometimes by using food pantries. Sometimes those are on site at the trustee's office. Some townships have emergency shelters, or they have arrangements with another shelter in their area where they can locate someone that finds themselves in a homeless situation. Trustees should be very clear with the applicant and the household as to what their expectations are. And I can tell you that most trustees expect that when you apply for township assistance, that you have done everything you know to do prior to making the application. For example, if you do have a savings account, most likely you're going to have to liquidate that account prior to the township approving assistance from the township. The trustee is going to look at all income for the past 30 days. At times we can go back 60 days or further if there has been a large lump sum receipt into the household, for example, a tax return of several $1,000s. They may take a look at that income back further than the 30 or 60 days and estimate how long that should have lasted in the household. So you will be asked to show your expenditures or estimate your expenditures. While some may refer to the trustee as the last resort, it's not always the case that the trustee has to be the last resort. Many times people find themselves visiting their trustee or calling their trustee when they don't know what else to do. And we can act as a case manager in those situations to help people access other services. I need to mention as well, if you disagree with the trustee's decision, the determination that you receive in writing will give information as to how to appeal. And in most counties in Indiana, you would appeal with the county commissioners. It's a little different in, say, Marion County, but they do have a hearing officer who will hear both from the trustee and the applicant and either uphold the trustee's decision or overturn it. So that is primarily the process, and it's difficult for some people sometimes to figure out which township they live in. And we recommend that you use 211. It's if you're unfamiliar with that, you simply dial 211 on the phone, and you'll be asked questions as to what you're needing. And let's say you need shelter, they'll refer you to the appropriate trustee. So I recommend that as the best way to get a hold of your trustee if you don't know them already. And just want to point out that my organization, the Indiana Township Association, does not work directly with clients. We support the townships with education and guidance as needed. However, we're certainly glad to take a call and try to direct you to the appropriate trustee if for some reason the 211 does not accurately define that for you. So I thank you for this time, and I'll turn it back to Mackenzie.
Thank you, Debbie. I appreciate it. So we will, so like she said, the 211 number, I can list that in the chat for you all to remember as well. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Brad Meadows with IHCDA. And he's got a presentation for you all as well.
Well, thank you, Mackenzie, and I hope everyone can see my slides. Mackenzie, can you see them okay?
Yes, I can see your slides, but your camera is off.
Let's see. Okay, I think we're good now. Well, good afternoon, and certainly I just want to share first my appreciation to the Indiana Civil Rights Commission for hosting this webinar and for their partnership, as well as Debbie and your partnership at the Indiana Township Trustee Association, or excuse me, Indiana Township Association. My name is Brad Meadows. I'm the Marketing and Communications Director for the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority. I just want to highlight a few programs that we have available specifically for individuals that have been financially impacted by COVID-19. So first, the mission at IHCDA, we provide housing opportunities, promote self-sufficiency, and strengthen communities. We have about 35 state and federal programs that we administer at IHCDA. We're primarily a financial institution in the sense that we receive federal and state funding, and we oftentimes distribute that funding to local organizations. Over the past few months, we've worked very closely with a variety of partners and subgrantees to identify some specific housing and utility resources for Hoosiers that have been, again, financially impacted by COVID-19. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes to kind of walk you through those programs and provide some links to find some additional information. The good news is that each of the programs I'm going to be talking about this afternoon, applications are still being accepted. So I know we're several months into the COVID-19 pandemic, and I'm pleased to report that all of these programs are still available. So the first program I'd like to talk about is specifically for homeowners. So I want to be very clear that the Indiana Foreclosure Prevention Network is for homeowners. And mortgage assistance is available for families and households that have been impacted have had a financial hardship, or anyone that's fallen behind on their mortgage, IFPN can provide up to 6 months of mortgage assistance. Mortgage reinstatement assistance is also available for households that have fallen behind on their mortgage but are now in a position to continue making those payments. So what we found is that early in the pandemic, if someone had their hours cut or were laid off temporarily, they may be back in a situation where they can continue making those payments, but they were behind on their mortgage. So we have the ability to help in that situation for qualifying households. So the website is 877gethope.org. We also have a toll-free number available as well. I would strongly encourage anyone that has access to get on the website to do so. We have worked diligently to update that with some information, some FAQs to ensure that folks can get on there and quickly determine if they're eligible or not. And it'll also allow us to most efficiently process the application and begin determining if you're eligible for assistance. The next resource I'd like to talk about is the state's rental assistance portal. So this portal is located at the top of the indianahousingnow.org webpage. The portal is currently accepting applications for rental assistance. Up to 6 months of rental assistance is available for individuals financially impacted by COVID-19. Again, additional information can be found on the top of the indianahousingnow.org webpage. One note on this, the state's rental assistance portal is for the 91 counties outside of Marion. So if you're living in Marion County or in Indianapolis, and you're in need of rental assistance, you'll want to go to indyrent.org. The city of Indianapolis has a rental assistance program available, and they too are still accepting applications for that program. The Indiana Housing Now website is a great resource. So I mentioned that there's a link to the rental assistance portal, but also it's just an unbelievable resource for individuals that are in need of affordable housing. So this is the state's best resource to find affordable housing, affordable rental units, I should say. Also, there's listings of market rate housing as well. There's also a toll-free number available if you are in need of finding those units. And the information again is on the slide. There's just a variety of other housing resources that can be accessed as well from this website. The next resource I'd like to briefly talk about is the Energy Assistance Program. So I mentioned at IHCDA we have about 35 programs, and through this program we're able to help more people than any other program that we offer. About 110,000 households every single year receive energy assistance here in Indiana, and we receive this funding from the federal government through the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Applications for this program year are being accepted currently. Really, the Energy Assistance Program was developed to help households help with the increase in utility costs during the winter months. Certainly, as it starts to get colder, unfortunately, here in Indiana, there's an increase in utility bills. So this program was designed to help offset that. In addition to the standard energy assistance benefit, there's also an additional $350 CARES Act benefit that is available to qualifying households. Very similarly, like I described earlier with the hardest hit fund, if there was a reduction in income during the past year, that qualifying households may be eligible for that additional $350 CARES Act benefit, which is roughly 2 months of utility service for the average household. I know Debbie mentioned 211. 211 is a great way to also find out who your energy assistance utility provider is. And so I would encourage anyone to call 211 and ask who their energy assistance provider is. There's also a direct link to our website, our energy assistance page there as well. The last resource I'd like to talk to you about is our Coronavirus Eviction and Foreclosure Prevention Guide. We developed this with a number of organizations that are listed on the slide here early in the pandemic, and this guide was developed to try to collect a lot of the resources that are available that we were aware of. We wanted to try to provide a kind of one-stop shop for individuals to find information on available COVID-19 resources, in addition to providing some answers to frequently asked questions, and specifically for homeowners and renters as we think about housing, having conversations about, with your lender or your property manager or landlord, if you are falling behind on your payments, to provide some really good tools and information and to help. Again, the link to that guide is also on the slide. One thing we developed, and I think the one thing that Mackenzie said to kick things off, which I thought was very, very important, is that we've tried to do the best we can to get information out about these key programs, but we also understand that we only have a limited reach, as an organization, and we really have leaned heavily on organizations like the Indiana Civil Rights Commission and the Indiana Township Association and a variety of other organizations to help share this information. And we just so much appreciate the opportunity to share as well today during this webinar. But if you're an organization and you're, able to help assist us, we've developed a communications toolkit that is on our website. And what we've done is we've provided just some very high level information similar to what I provided here, that we would just really appreciate you sharing this information to those folks that you serve. And we've got some social media graphics and some other information that makes it easy for you to share about this really, really important information. So, Mackenzie, with that said, I will turn things back over to you.
All righty, thank you. I appreciate it. Yes, and it is very important. We have found that, when we partner with a lot of different agencies, we can all work together to share and reach out to many different networks. So we really appreciate the partnership that we have developed with IHCDA and Indiana Township Association. So thank you again from both of you and Tim as well for presenting today. All of this information is, really important for everyone to know. It's amazing how many people don't realize what resources are out there and available to them. So we do appreciate both of you coming on board and helping us spread that information today. It looks like we actually do not have any questions in the comment box. So I think what we'll probably go ahead, I'm going to leave the event open for any attendees who would like to leave comments. I will also post my personal email in there for anyone. If you come up with any other questions that you have later on, you can reach out to me, and then I will make sure the appropriate person responds to you with an answer on your questions. So again, thank you, Brad. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Tim, for being here today. And thank you to all of you who have joined. And tomorrow morning, I should have the full recording on our website at in.gov/ICRC. And I'll also list that in the chat. So you'll be able to view, share within your network and your colleagues and family and friends. So thank you again. It was a pleasure. And we look forward to future virtual trainings as we extend these webinars out. So thank you.